in the flesh. Look at it. Yeah, we have quite
Hello, hello, hello. Okay, just testing the mic. Georgette and Enrique, are your mics working okay? Have you guys done mic check?
Testing, testing, 1, 2,
Yeah.
3.
1, 2, 1, 2. Yep,
Cool.
it is.
Hey.
I'm like, I didn't have time to go home and get my clothes. I didn't get my blazer. I'm like, need more.
Oh,
I'm like, I think.
I would,
Such a pain.
huh?
It's just been.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's 2 o'clock and we would normally get started, but we're still not at a quorum. So we're just missing one more member and then we'll get started. So they'll be arriving in about, I think, 5 to 10 minutes. All right, good afternoon, everyone. We'll go ahead and get this meeting started. Welcome to the March 9th, 2023 meeting of the San Diego County Air Pollution Control District Governing Board meeting. And my name is Chair Bush, and right now I will call the meeting to order at 2:05 p.m. Madam Clerk, can you please call the roll?
Thank you, Chair Bush. I would like to remind those members of the public joining us by teleconference to please select your preferred language using the interpretation button at the bottom of the Zoom screen. Before I call the roll, I would like to note for the record that members Birkbeck Garcia, Elo Rivera, Lawson Reamer, Shu, and Vargas have notified us that they will be absent from today's proceedings. All remaining board members are participating in person. With that, Member Gloria,
Here.
Member Gomez,
Here.
Member Martinez,
Here.
Member Medina,
Here.
Member Sanchez,
Present.
Chair Bush.
Here.
Thank you.
All right, moving on to public communication. This is non-agenda, and this is an opportunity for members of the public to speak to the board on any subject matter within the board's jurisdiction, not on items not on the agenda today. And Marvis, are there any members of the public that filled in speaker slip that wish to speak?
Thank you, Chair Bush. We've received no in-person speaker slips. However, I will go ahead and request that if there are any members that are joining us virtually that would like to speak under non-agenda public communication, to please go ahead and indicate that you would like to do so by using the raise hand feature at the bottom of the Zoom screen or by pressing *9 now. We have 3 members of the public that wish to address the board. I will be calling the speakers either by their name or the last 4 digits of their phone number. You will hear a notification that your call has been unmuted. At that time, please press *6 to unmute your phone and state your name for the audio record. You will have 3 minutes to address the board. I ask that you self-regulate your time and that you mute your live stream before speaking. Our first speaker is Suzanne Hume.
Hi, and thank you very much. Good afternoon. My name is Suzanne Hume. I am the Educational Director and founder of CleanEarthForKids.org, and so excited for today. Clean air saves lives. We have lots of information on our CleanEarthForKids.org website, Team 3, Clean Air, and also our wood smoke page and our Team 5 pesticide page. So pesticides, well, first of all, let me just say, this issue is very important to me. I was poisoned by pesticides because I lived 100 feet from where West Coast tomato growers is allowed to grow their tomatoes using toxic pesticides banned in other countries. We have lists available for anyone who would like to see it. The city of Oceanside and the County of San Diego continue to lease to West Coast tomato growers, and some members have even been pictured there. Although I was poisoned, I have all the doctor's notes, all this and that. Pesticide drift is a big deal, especially in San Diego County. We're asking that the San Diego Air Pollution Control District put this on the agenda and the radar. We know CARB is taking this on, and we're really glad. But we need San Diego County to do this. Pesticides can drift miles, wiping out crops across state lines, harming children and families. Pesticide drift is dependent on many factors. It travels great distance throughout the air. Many toxic pesticides, like I said, we request records, so we have everything. And we would love to show you what is happening in the city of Oceanside and with San Diego County. Again, people living 100 feet from the tomato fields at West Coast tomato growers, and they're also called Oceanside poles. And it's just unacceptable. So even PFAS are found in pesticides because, the PFAS migrating into the pesticides from the plastic bottles. And we know that pesticides, the ones that we're talking about, are toxic. And like I said, banned in the EU and many other countries, many banned in China as well. So this is just not okay. We're also asking you to send a letter to West Coast Tomato, to the city of Oceanside and to the County of San Diego to ask them to please stop leasing land to West Coast tomato growers and anyone using toxic pesticides, especially those so close to homes near our water source, which it is in Oceanside as well. Much more to say. Thank you from CleanEarthForKids.org, and we'd love to collaborate and talk about this. The last thing I'll say quickly is also lead. We need to stop the sale, use, and storage of leaded aviation fuel at the Oceanside Airport, and the County of San Diego is got one in Carlsbad and the different airports. There is no safe level of lead. It is very unfair for our children to be exposed to lead dust because lead permanently harms children's brains. We need to take action to protect our children and their future, our water and wildlife, our environment and climate. Thank you from CleanEarthForKids.org.
Thank you. Our next speaker is John Bottorff. You have 3 minutes to address the board. Please begin by stating your name for the record.
Good afternoon. My name is John Bottorff with CleanEarthForKids.org. I'm asking you today to take action to stop the sale, use, and storage of lead aviation fuel. Lead is a toxic heavy metal with no safe level. It is a cumulative poison that does not break down in the environment and is especially toxic to children and unborn babies. It damages their brains and nervous systems, lowers IQ scores, harms muscle coordination, speech, language, and causes behavior problems. Leaded aviation fuel, called avgas, is still used in about 170,000 piston engine planes and helicopters across the U.S. These aircraft are responsible for 70% of airborne lead in the U.S. and are linked to elevated blood lead levels in people living near airports using avgas. 4 of the top 100 lead-polluting airports in the U.S. are here in San Diego County. According to EPA data, these aircraft at Montgomery Field dump over 1,100 pounds of lead into the air every year. Same with Gillespie Field. Palomar Airport, over 700 pounds, and Ramona, over 600 pounds. That is over 3,500 pounds of lead in our air every year from just 4 airports in our county. And there is no safe level of lead. A 2013 study by the San Diego APCD showed that Palomar Airport exceeded national ambient air quality standards for lead. That was over 10 years ago. Studies show lead hurts kids' brains, leading to lower reading and math test scores and higher rates of suspension and detention, high school dropout rates and crime, and time spent in prison. Kids in Flint, Michigan saw a 30% drop in reading proficiency because of lead. A study done by the County of Santa Clara found children living within 1/2 mile of their airport had lead levels nearly twice that of kids at Flint. Santa Clara has stopped leaded fuel at their airport, as has the city of Santa Monica. Long Beach and Van Nuys Airport in Los Angeles have started the process to be unleaded. Please take action and work with federal, state, and county agencies to get the lead out of San Diego airports and notify and educate those living and working near these airports they are being poisoned by lead. Please protect our kids and help to stop the sale, use, and storage of leaded fuel. Thank you from Clean Earth for Kids.
Thank you. Our final speaker, the last 4 digits end in 9992. Again, it's 9992. You'll have 3 minutes to address the board. Please begin by stating your name for the record.
My name is Vanessa Forsyth, and I reside in Carlsbad, and I am also part of the Clean Earth for Kids group. I want to say that we really need to address the issue of woodhouse smoke because all smoke is toxic when it is in the air and impacts all of us. It is something that will probably take a culture shift, but we need to educate and inform the public about the risks associated with wood smoke. And also, you know, we are having issues in terms of synthetic turf being used in parks and public places, and it releases a lot of forever chemicals in its production, in it being in the earth, going into the soil and the air. Recently, a group of former Philadelphia baseball players, they were seeing a connection that a group of them had brain cancer and died from it, and they traced it back to the use of synthetic turf on the baseball field. Again, we need more data collection about ambient air and the impact of events that affect our health, hospitalizations, ER visits, cardiac risk, lung damage, and brain cancer, especially as this impacts more children whose bodies are still developing, pregnant women with fetuses. So again, ask you to address this in all that you do going forward, and please inform the public about the risks of woodhouse smoke. Thank you.
Thank you. We have one last caller, David Ramos. You may begin by stating your name for the record. You will have 3 minutes to address the board.
Hello, my name is David Ramos. I'm a resident of the Logan Heights area, and I came to represent my community and help show the different inequalities that this community's faced over the long history. Dealing with a variety of different pollutions from facilities, from freeways, from the different trucks that pass by and the docks. It's been a largely overviewed community that hasn't gotten the right of the light that it deserves. And I'm here to talk about the different issues that have been facing that community. I just wanted to state that the levels of the PM levels of carbon particulate has been nearly double the amount of the average of California. And I wanted something to be done to help mitigate that level, because there's no safe levels of PM carbon particulate for communities, and especially for residents of this community, because it's such a largely impacted for my family and for my community. Coming from a Latino community, it's something that makes it a lot harder to get by in the world and just makes it hard to succeed in life overall. So I'm hoping that something could be done to help these communities and others like it. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes public testimony under non-agenda public comment.
Great. Thank you, Marvis, and thank you to the speakers who came to speak today. Moving on to item number C, that's the approval of the January 12th, 2023 minutes, or the statement of proceedings. Before we move on for the actual approval, Marvis, are there any members of the public that wish to address the board?
Thank you, Chair Bush. I have received no request to speak under this item for any members of the public that are in person. However, if there are any members that are joining us virtually, go ahead and raise your hand at this time by pressing *9 now, or by using the raise hand feature at the bottom of the Zoom screen. Seeing no hands raised, there are no members of the public wishing to address the board on this item.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Marvis. And what is the pleasure of the board? Can I get a motion? Yes.
Move approval.
Second.
All right, so we have a motion from member Gloria and a second from member Gomez. And do you call, and Marvis, do you prefer calling the roll, or do you want me?
Whatever you want to do.
Okay, yeah, you go ahead and call the roll. Yeah.
I'll call the
Please
roll. Thank you. Member Gloria?
Aye.
Member Gomez?
Yes.
Member Martinez?
Yes.
Member Medina?
Aye.
Member Sanchez?
Aye.
Chair Bush?
Yes.
Thank you. With members Burtbeck Garcia, Elo Rivera, Lawson Reamer, Shu, and Vargas absent, that motion passes with all board members who are present voting aye.
Great, thank you, Marvis. And so we're skipping item number D. There's no items on the consent calendar, so we're moving on to E1, agenda E1, and that is adoption of a teleconference policy for the San Diego Air Pollution Control District Governing Board and standing committees. Madam Clerk, can you please provide the public testimony instructions before we move on to the presentation?
Thank you, Chair Bush. I would ask members of the public that have requested to speak on this item to please either approach the podium at this time, or those members that are joining us via teleconference to please dial into the conference line now using the instructions that are provided on your Zoom screen. You may also indicate that you wish to speak on this item by using the raise hand feature at the bottom of the Zoom screen, or by pressing *9 now. All public testimony will be heard at the conclusion of the staff presentation. Give me just a minute to queue up.
We've received no public speakers on this, right?
I'm sorry.
So we received no speakers on this, or we're moving on to the presentation?
We are going to move on to the presentation
Great.
and allow any speakers to let us know.
Oh, got it. Understood. Appreciate that. Okay. Well, with that, we'll go ahead and call staff up, and we have our APCD Senior Deputy County Counsel to begin.
Good afternoon, Chair Bush and members of the board. First, I think this is probably timely for this policy, but I wanted to apologize for appearing remotely myself because my daughter and I are both under the weather today. So unfortunately, I can't be there in person today. But this action is to ask for the board to adopt a teleconference policy, and the policy is intended to outline Brown Act requirements and provide additional details for public participation. Next slide. So, as you know, the governor signed AB 361 back during the COVID pandemic to allow public bodies to meet remotely during a declared state of emergency. While AB 361 technically expires at the end of 2023, the state of emergency was lifted in February. There is still an interest in allowing for remote participation by members of a legislative body under certain circumstances. So the governor signed AB 2449 on September 13th, 2022. Under AB 2449, the legislative body members may teleconference in public meetings from a remote location without following the standard Brown Act teleconferencing rules. This went into effect on January 1st, 2023 and expires on December 31st, 2025. So this policy provides the basic procedures that must be followed for teleconferencing under both the traditional Brown Act, which is still allowed, and under AB 2449. Thank you. Next slide. Under traditional Brown Act, a member of a legislative body can participate remotely so long as a quorum is participating within the boundaries of the board. But that member must be at a location that is accessible to the public and is identified as a teleconference or video conference location on the agenda. If a member appears by teleconference or video conference, all votes must be taken by roll call, and there is no limit on the number of times a member can participate this way. If there's a disruption in the broadcast or public's ability to comment, the meeting can still proceed. Next slide. Under AB 2449, a member may participate by video conference without notifying or identifying on the agenda what their location is. However, it's only under certain circumstances, the first being just cause and the second is emergency circumstances. Just cause is if there's childcare or caregiving needs, a contagious illness that prevents the member from attending in person, a need related to a physical or mental disability, or travel and official business of the legislative body or another state or local agency. Emergency circumstances has an additional step, which is that the board must approve, or the legislative body must approve the emergency circumstance before that member is allowed to participate under that provision. And that is defined as a physical or family medical emergency that prevents a member from participating in person. Next slide. In addition, a quorum of the legislative body must participate in person, and there's annual limits on use. So that cannot be invoked more than 2 meetings if the legislative body has fewer than 10 meetings per calendar year. If there were more than 10 meetings, which doesn't apply to this board, the limitation would be 20% of the meetings of the year. And just cause cannot be invoked more than twice per calendar year per member. All votes must be taken by roll call, and the meeting cannot proceed if there's a disruption or a broadcast of the broadcast or public's ability to comment. Our teleconference policy is also incorporating requirements for public participation. We did want to extend, based on the comments that we've received from members of the public, the opportunity for the public to participate by teleconference or video conference, even if the legislative body needs to be in person in one location. So that is clear in the teleconference policy that the ability to participate by a teleconference or video conference is maintained for the public. And as I'm doing today, APCD staff may participate via teleconference or video conference at the discretion of the legislative body chair or the air pollution control officer. And so with that, we ask that the board adopt the teleconference policy, which is attachment A in the board package. And I would be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, staff, for the presentation. Marvis, do we have any members of the public that wish to address the board on this item?
Thank you, Chair Bush. We have received no request from any members of the public in person to address the board on this item. I see no hands raised in our virtual Zoom meeting. However, if there are any members of the public still wishing to address the board, you can press *9 now or use the raise hand feature at the bottom of your Zoom screen. If there's anyone in the room, feel free to wave at me now if you'd like to speak on this item. Otherwise, seeing no hands in either location, there are no members of the public wishing to provide public testimony on this item.
Thank you, Marvis. And moving on to board comments, and I see Member Sanchez.
Thank you, Chair Bush. I would like to move adoption.
We got a motion on the floor. Do we have a second? All right.
Second by Benita.
All right, so we have a motion for Member Sanchez. We have a second from Member Medina. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Thank you, Chair Bush. Member Gloria,
Aye.
Member Gomez,
Yes.
Member Martinez,
Yes.
Member Medina,
Aye.
Member Sanchez,
Aye.
Chair Bush.
Yes.
Thank you. With members Beck Garcia, Elo Rivera, Lawson Reamer, Shu, and Vargas absent, that motion passes with all board members who are present voting aye.
Thank you, Marvis. Moving on to item E2. E2 is adoption of the proposed San Diego County revised plan for attaining the state ambient air quality standards for ozone 2022 regional air quality strategy. Madam Clerk, can you please provide the public testimony instructions before you move on to the presentation?
Thank you, Chair Bush. I would ask any members of the public that would like to speak on this item to go ahead and complete a speaker slip at this time. Any members that are joining us via teleconference or via Zoom, please dial into the conference line now using the instructions provided on the screen. You may also indicate that you wish to speak on this item by using the raise hand feature at the bottom of the Zoom screen or by pressing *9 now. All public testimony will be heard at the conclusion of the staff presentation.
Thank you, Marvis. And so we'll go ahead and move on with the staff presentation and listen to our Deputy Director, Michael Watt. So Mr. Watt, you can go ahead and start the presentation.
Good afternoon, Chair Bush and members of the board. Thank you very much. Item E2 today requests governing board approval for the district's updated plan to attain state ozone standards, known locally as the Regional Air Quality Strategy, or RAQS, RAQS. The board is being asked to approve the 2022 RAQS at today's hearing, as well as an environmental impact report addendum prepared pursuant to the California Environmental Quality Act, or CEQA, and a corresponding resolution with relevant findings. I'll now turn it over to Supervising Air Resources Specialist Nick Cormier, who will provide this presentation.
Thank you, Mike. Good afternoon, Chair Bush and governing board members. My name is Nick Cormier, and today I'll be presenting a brief overview of the district's 2022 revision to its plan to attain state ozone standards, known as the Regional Air Quality Strategy, or RAQS, for your consideration. This follows our presentation to the governing board last August, where we discussed the conceptual framework for the RAQS and incorporated board member feedback into the document before you today for approval. Next slide, please. First, a quick refresher on how ozone forms in San Diego County. Ozone pollution forms when common air pollutants emitted by all sources chemically react under the influence of sunlight and heat. This ozone, known as ground level ozone, is harmful to breathe and therefore is regulated as an air pollutant. Children, seniors, people with existing lung disease, and those who spend time outdoors are at increased risk of health impacts. San Diego County is subject to ozone pollution formation because of its topographic features and warm, sunny climate. This results in the district's high altitude monitoring station in Alpine experiencing higher summertime ozone levels than other areas of the region. Though most of the county is in attainment with existing ozone standards, the region overall is considered a non-attainment area because sources throughout the region contribute to ozone pollution in Alpine. Next slide, please. Ozone precursor emissions, specifically VOC and NOx, have been trending downward as a result of previous clean air actions. This has resulted in improved air quality and less ozone formation. The trend line for ozone pollution as measured at the Alpine Monitoring Station has trended downward since the late 70s. There is year-to-year variability caused by hot weather periods. However, these upticks only reflect a flattening of progress. Regardless, it's clear that additional progress is necessary in order to meet the state and federal ozone standards and to protect public health. San Diego County has not yet attained state ozone standards, and as such has been designated by CARB as a state non-attainment area for ozone. Next slide, please. Because we are a non-attainment area, the region is required to prepare a plan to attain state ozone standards. This plan, known as the RAQS, is periodically updated pursuant to state law to consider and schedule all feasible stationary source measures as they become technologically feasible, improve air quality, or protect public health. The individual measures included are then developed into proposed local rules in the following years as part of a public rule development process. Upon approval by the governing board, each RACS update is then submitted to CARB for its consideration. The RACS addresses state ozone planning requirements and is treated independently from federal ozone planning requirements, which are addressed through the district's federal ozone plan that was last adopted in 2020. The RACS must also reaffirm that enactment of a more stringent emission offset threshold is not needed to attain state ozone standards. This affirmation, known as a no net increase demonstration, ensures new sources of air pollution do not contribute to worsening air quality. As directed during the August governing board meeting, staff has prepared the no net increase analysis for inclusion in the 2022 RACS, but has included a study measure with the plan to evaluate its inclusion in future RACS revisions. Next slide, please. The 2022 RACS is now centered around a purpose and vision for the future, which includes two main goals: protect public health and protect the climate. This will be done by reducing air pollutant and GHG emissions in the near term, investigating new opportunities in the long term, and contributing to the region's long-term transformation to a carbon neutral future. The 2022 RACS accomplishes this in two ways: through opportunities for direct pollutant reductions of ozone and opportunities for indirect pollutant reductions of greenhouse gases and particulate matter. Improvements were also made in the 2022 RACS in how the data was presented and what topics the document could elevate. This includes making the 2022 RACS more readable and visually appealing. The RACS now also includes information that, for the first time locally, discusses ozone's relationship to public health, under-resourced communities, greenhouse gases, and climate change, and expands our analysis on mobile sources. To ensure the community is informed about what the 2022 RACS is comprised of, and in support of APCD's recently adopted language access policy, the district will also be developing a 2022 RACS fact sheet in English, Spanish, and other languages as needed for the public. Required technical information that predominantly made up most of the previous RACS revisions has now been moved to supplementary attachments in the plan. Next slide, please. The main section of the 2022 RACS that staff wanted to highlight this afternoon is the proposed schedule to adopt all feasible measures, a critical component of the RACS required by state law. These proposed measures, as found in the left column of the screen, will be evaluated over the next 3 years for consideration and potential adoption or amendment if they are found to be feasible. These measures include AB 617 SERP commitments, as well as state or federal mandates that will further reduce NOx and VOC, and as a co-benefit, GHGs and PM. Possible measures that require further study, as shown in the column on the right, need more time to evaluate prior to pursuing or scheduling rule development activity. Should these evaluations determine if emission reductions are feasible and cost-effective to implement, they would then be scheduled for possible adoption in a future RACS update. Next slide, please. Combined, the possible measures included in the 2022 RACS are anticipated to result in substantial annual health benefits, both region-wide and in our most vulnerable communities. This includes fewer incidents of cardiovascular disease, respiratory-related illnesses, hospital admissions, emergency room visits, exacerbated asthma cases, or lost or restricted workdays. Adoption of SERP-identified measures, such as a possible indirect source rule and restaurant cooking operations, will provide additional benefits to the health of the most vulnerable communities in San Diego County, such as the Portside area and the international border. At the same time, avoiding healthcare-related costs and lost productive workdays would contribute as much as $18.9 million on an annual basis to our local economy. Next slide, please. The 2022 RACS ozone control strategy also details what APCD can and is doing in regards to mobile sources, which are the predominant emitters of NOx in San Diego County. Controlling mobile source emissions falls outside of our regulatory authority. However, the district does deploy many incentive programs to achieve direct emission reductions and can further expand on those efforts. These include new and innovative grant programs for electric vehicle charging stations, programs for air monitors and air purifiers, and the forthcoming Clean Cars for All program for cleaner vehicle purchases in under-resourced communities. It also includes APCD's potential indirect source strategy, which the board will be hearing more about as the year progresses, as well as APCD's agreement with CARB to continue enforcing mobile source regulations. APCD will also investigate new opportunities that we could potentially take advantage of, as well as areas in which the district could potentially reduce air pollution in non-traditional ways, but still within our regulatory authority. These efforts balance multiple district priorities, including those envisioned in AB 423, the 2019 legislation that resulted in APCD's becoming an independent agency. Next slide, please. In support of APCD's public participation plan, APCD has conducted outreach on the 2022 RACs in multiple ways. APCD held a bilingual kickoff workshop in fall 2021 to discuss some initial strategies and concepts being considered in the updated RACs. Feedback was incorporated based on the comments received. As an example, the district received comments from stakeholders recommending the district prioritize mode shift and vehicle miles traveled reductions and working to reduce suburban sprawl and support transit-oriented development. The district incorporated the recommendations into the new RACs chapter addressing ozone and greenhouse gases. In August 2022, staff presented to this board on the conceptual framework for the proposed 2022 RACs before you today to get board member feedback on the proposed plan, which was also incorporated. Last fall, staff then conducted a series of public presentations to present the proposed 2022 RACs. This outreach included presentations to the Portside and International Border Steering Committees, SANDAG working groups, as well as another virtual public workshop to receive feedback. Altogether, this outreach touched many different constituencies and communities, including environmental groups, industry, tribal nations, local chambers of commerce, and members of the public located inside and out of under-resourced communities within the county. Next slide, please. Today's recommendation includes the following. First, staff recommends the board find the previously certified EIR for the RACs was completed in compliance with CEQA. Second, staff recommends the board find that there are no changes in the project that would involve significant new environmental impacts not considered in the EIR, and that preparation of the 2022 RACs EIR addendum is appropriate under CEQA. Third, staff recommends adopting the corresponding resolution to approve the 2022 RACs and to make appropriate findings. And finally, direct the Air Pollution Control Officer to forward the approved 2022 RACs to CARB. Next slide, please. This concludes our presentation today. We are happy to answer any questions at this time. Thank you.
All right, thank you, staff. And before we move on to public comment, are there any clarification questions from the board members on the presentation? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to public comment. Arviz.
Thank you, Chair Bush. We have received one request for public comment in person, Nicholas Paul. And then we also have four members of the public that will be speaking virtually. I'll be calling your names by I'll be calling you either by your name or by the last four digits of your phone number. When it is your turn to speak, please begin by stating your name for the record. You will have 3 minutes to address the board. We'll begin with Nicholas Paul.
Good afternoon, board members, APCD staff. Hello. My name is Nicolas Paul. I'm from EHC. It's nice to be with you all today. Really quick, I appreciate the report from APCD staff and the plan to get us to the state standards by 2032. What caught my attention from the materials provided is that 62% of all the ozone emissions in the county are caused by mobile sources, cars, heavy duty trucks, cargo equipment. And the irony of that is that this body has limited authority to regulate those items. And so I wanted to take this opportunity to elevate the importance of creative solutions. And those were flagged by APCD staff today, particularly the indirect source rule. The CSC down in San Isidro and Otay Mesa have flagged the boom, and you all are well aware of the boom of warehouses in Otay Mesa and throughout our region. This is a huge issue, and it's going to continue to be a huge issue in our communities. And so I wanted to take this opportunity to, again, elevate how important an indirect source rule is going to be over the next coming year. and elevate how urgent it is to make sure that this rule is making sure that the emissions from indirect sources like distribution centers, warehouses in our communities is fleshed out, right? And yeah, so that's the gist of my comment today, and I appreciate you all giving me the opportunity to speak.
Thank you. Our next public speaker is Serena Pelka. You will have 3 minutes to address the board. Please begin by stating your name for the record.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Serena Pelka, Policy Advocate with Climate Action Campaign. Thank you to APCD staff for your in-depth and meaningful work on the 2022 Regional Air Quality Strategy. We are supportive of the board adopting the 2022 strategy and fully support the priority of reducing mobile emissions to address air quality, public health, and carbon emissions. We also encourage the board to prioritize the development and implementation of a zero emissions appliance standard to protect San Diego families and communities from the dangers of methane gas. The Bay Area Air Quality Management District is poised to adopt an appliance standard next week, and APCD is well positioned to follow suit. Gas appliances are a key driver of poor air quality and high asthma rates, and replacing that pollution upon burnout with zero NOx emitting appliances will provide enormous health and climate benefits for our communities. As the board will later evaluate individual measures to confirm their technological availability, emission reduction potential, and cost effectiveness, we know addressing pollution from gas appliances through an appliance standard will check all of those boxes. APCD can also support effective policies and programs by securing funding for implementation through the abundant federal grants within the Inflation Reduction Act. We see APCD as a critical actor in improving quality of life in San Diego and encourage the district to become the regional lead on climate action. Thank you so much for your time today and for your work to protect public health.
Thank you. The next member that we have is John Botorff. You will have 3 minutes to address the board. Please begin by stating your name for the record.
Good afternoon. My name is John Botorff with cleanearthforkids.org. It is incredibly important to reduce our particulate matter levels, and that means stopping wood smoke. Regulating wood burning must be a top priority right now. According to the San Diego APCD 2021 Annual Air Quality Report and your 2022 Regional Air Quality Strategy, residential fuel combustion, which is wood burning, is tied with construction demolition as main sources of PM 2.5 in San Diego County. Wood burning dumps almost 3.5 tons of particulate matter into our air every day. And it also dumps into our air 0.45 tons of volatile organic compounds every day as well. PM 2.5 is especially dangerous. These particles are 2.5 microns in diameter, much smaller than the width of a human hair, which is 50 microns. These microscopic particles can penetrate deep into the lungs, get into our bloodstream, and even into our organs and brains. Research clearly shows exposure to particulate matter increases the risk of serious health outcomes, including asthma, pre-birth, birth defects, hypertension, heart attacks, strokes, cancer, and brain conditions like Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, and dementia. Particulate matter can also cause immediate asthma attacks, heart attacks, and strokes. Particulate matter from things like wood smoke hurts both our indoor and outdoor air quality. Wood smoke also contains nitrogen oxides, carbon monoxide, methane, carbon dioxide, and cancer-causing pollutants like benzene, formaldehyde, acrolein, and polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, or PAHs. Burning 10 pounds of wood in 1 hour creates the same cancer-causing PAHs as 6,000 packs of cigarettes. That's like smoking a pack of cigarettes a day for 16 years just by sitting next to a wood fire. Wood burning has to stop. The APCD needs to prioritize stopping wood burning in the county. Other air districts have regulated wood burning for decades. There is no reason why this can't be done now. Please develop programs and incentives to remove existing wood burning fireplaces and stoves throughout the county and to work with cities and other agencies to stop wood fireplaces and stoves in new construction and renovations. We also ask you to educate the public that wood smoke is a health hazard and to work on stopping wood fires on all public lands like beaches and parks to protect clean air and our health. People with lung problems need to be able to safely go to beaches and parks or even just go outside at night. It is not fair that any child must risk an asthma attack just to go outside. We need to greatly reduce our PM levels in our county, and stopping wood burning is a great way to do that. We will send a follow-up letter on wood smoke to all of you. Thank you from cleanearthforkids.org.
Thank you. Our next public speaker is Suzanne Hume. Ms. Hume, you will have 3 minutes to address the board. Please begin by stating your name for the record.
Hello, my name is Suzanne Hume. I'm so sorry. It doesn't look like my time has started. Does it? Let's see. Okay, I'm not sure if you can hear me. I'm going to go ahead and start again.
We can hear you. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. I'm so sorry. The timer wasn't going down, so I apologize. Okay, and thank you for having the timer. Hello, my name is Suzanne Hume. I'm the educational director and founder of cleanearthforkids.org. As you know, we're all here because our air is in trouble in San Diego County, and we need to come together and do everything we can to reduce air pollution. We must fund public transportation, electrify buildings, adopt a zero appliance standard, and stop the burning of fossil fuels, biogas, wood, and pass public smoking bans, as is happening in the city of Encinitas. Yay! Okay. As you know, San Diego County receives an F in ozone and an F in particulate matter, according to the American Lung Association's State of the Air Report 2022. And in CalPERG's report, as you know, when combining smog and soot, San Diego has the worst air in the nation. There are actions that we can do now that are virtually free. They do not cost millions of dollars. It is up to the San Diego Air Pollution Control District Board, comprised of you guys, the city council members, the mayors and staff. So number one, you need to stop wood smoke in your city. So we are looking closely at all of the cities and the actions that they are taking and not taking, because with a stroke of your pen, you can save lives, but you have to make that decision. And it's hard to step up. It's hard to be a trailblazer, and it's hard to be a leader, but that's what you were elected to do. And that's why you sit on this board. Follow the mayor of London. He is taking it on. He is working to educate the public about the harms of wood smoke. And this is what leadership looks like. You must stop the wood burning in your city and in the county to save lives. As you know, wood smoke is toxic, and PM 2.5 is deadly. PM 2.5 is little bits of pollution breathed in, so small, crosses the blood-brain barrier. As you know, or as you may know, I started Clean Earth for Kids after I was poisoned by West Coast tomato growers in Oceanside using toxic pesticides 100 feet from where I live. Wood smoke knocks me to the ground. I had no idea I would talk on this issue or this would be a big part of Clean Earth for Kids, but it is now. In Oceanside, where people sometimes fish for their dinner at the small pier, right across from 5 wood burning fires. There's kids with strollers, moms, dads. This is not environmental justice. Public land should be accessible by everyone, including people with a lung condition, especially our kids, our pregnant women. A lot of information on cleanearthforkids.org, Team 3, Clean Air Saves Lives, and on our wood smoke page. Please see our videos made by youth, experts, and scientists. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Vanessa Forsyth. You will have 3 minutes to address the board. Please begin by stating your name for the record.
Vanessa Forsyth. Thank you for the presentation. That was informative. I am hoping that a lot of the things that you connected in terms of health and how the Air Quality Control Board in their next efforts can make a difference. I just wanted to share that, while our particular matter was better in the 15-17 years, it actually got worse in 2018 to 2020. And in terms of groups at risk, over 707,000 children under 18 are impacted, more than close to 500,000 adults over 65. Those with pediatric asthma, it's 48,000 plus. Adult asthma, 246,000 plus. The same with COPD. Lung cancer, 1,246. The impact on cardiovascular is 180,000. Pregnancies, 35,500 plus. Poverty, 300,807, and people of color, 1,852,000 plus. So that, again, who's impacted by what is in our air when it isn't of good air quality is significant to consider, those who are most vulnerable and most impacted. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next caller ends, their phone number ends in 7561. 7561. You have 3 minutes to address the board. Please begin by stating your name for the record.
Hello. Hello, it's Dr. Nguyen. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Hello. Hi, my name is V. Thuy Nguyen. I'm actually the chair of the American Academy of Pediatrics California Committee on Environmental Health, and in San Diego, also the chair of our Climate Change and Health Committee. I'm actually calling in the climate change and greenhouse gas. I'm all in support of that. I'm actually calling about a very niche issue. It's leaded air pollution around Montgomery Gibbs Environmental Airport. Our volunteer team has been trying to raise awareness and really deal with this very niche issue. There's about 1.5 tons of toxic leaded pollution raining down on Claremont and the children there. We know that lead is a pediatric neurotoxin. It shifts the IQ curve actually, and causes downstream, millions of societal costs in terms of lost wages and developmental delay, autism, ADHD. It's a very, very, very focused, very important issue. We've dropped an op-ed in the San Diego Union Tribune already, and we just published a paper in the Journal of Community Health, which I'll send. And so I just wanted to make sure that the board was aware that leaded air pollution is also an issue, because yes, we need to save the earth for the kids and the climate and everything, but if they have autism, ADHD, it doesn't really help. So please remember leaded aviation fuel as a very important issue that we should address as a community, because it's affecting our kids and their development. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I believe our last caller is David Ramos. David Ramos, you will have 3 minutes to address the board. Please begin by stating your name for the record.
Hi, my name is David Ramos, and I am a fourth-year student at Cal State San Marcos. I'm a resident of the Logan Heights area, and I want to talk about the policy that's being placed. So with the inevitable increase of temperature and weather due to climate change, there's a necessity for there to be lower pollutions in the community, especially for those in less developed communities and minority groups being mainly affected by these outcomes. So by creating a more safe future for the next generation, it allows for a more sustainable environment that gives people a better chance at life, minimizing any form of air pollution in the community and limiting intergenerational health degradation that would otherwise harm their way of life. regardless of location, these actions need to be taken to help manage people's overall health and give people the time and money that they need to live that kind of sustainable future. People can go their whole lives without even knowing that they're being affected by these issues. And I wanted to be the voice in my community that talks about this today. I want everyone to have an equal opportunity for life. And I hope that the choice made today could make a difference in my community and others like it. I appreciate your work and hope that you can do the right choice today.
Thank you. That concludes public testimony on this item.
Great. Thank you, Marvis, and thank you to all the speakers who came before us to speak. Just really want to give a shout out to staff on the presentation, on the PowerPoint. We always talk about how to make it just more accessible, and the visuals is important, just being straightforward with the graphics there and just really illustrating the benefits of this, right? One of the things that I really appreciated is seeing the breakdown of the actual health impacts. These rules save lives, and I just want us to continue to repeat that because it's sometimes we get glossed in the nexus and the complexity of the issues and of the rules, but this, at the end of the day, this is saving lives and this has huge health impacts. Also appreciate the comments about pointing out that the majority of our sources, they are mobile sources, and we do have limitations, but that's also why we're making a big effort for mobile source rules. So I appreciate the comments there. And with that, I open it up to my colleagues' comments, and I believe Member Gomez has questions or comments.
Yeah, thank you. And also want to echo the appreciation to staff. So thank you for that and for the information. I do have a question related to the indirect source rule. We have it as a possibility. Can you talk a little bit about that more in terms of why a possibility, not why something that we're going to do?
Sure, I can speak to that to a certain extent. The staff is currently evaluating, the recent rule that was approved up at South Coast, taking a look at what opportunities might exist there, looking at various sources of information and data here in the County of San Diego, and then we'll be bringing that to the board. Our plan is to bring that back to the board in June with some options and recommendations for how to proceed at that point, and then the board will provide direction on yes, proceed with the rule or look at other alternatives. So that's the game plan moving forward. But it is, a bit of a groundbreaking effort here, even though South Coast has done something similar. There are some legal challenges that are going on up there. And so we're trying to keep apprised of all those different things and moving pieces. Another thing that we're working on is putting out kind of a preliminary staff report that we hope to release in advance of that board meeting in June to get some feedback from both members of the board and members of the public in advance to having that discussion.
Okay.
But that's where we're working our way towards a decision point on that.
Okay, I appreciate that. That's more clear. I took it as something different. So that's why I wanted that clarity. So I appreciate that. And happy to make a motion if need be.
All right, thank you. So we have a motion from Member.
I'll second.
Oh, there's some issues with the mic. Okay, so we have a motion from Member Gomez, second from Member Sanchez, and we still have some more comments from colleagues. So Member Gloria.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And just some questions for staff, nothing too heavy, but forgive, this is more about my education, trying to understand the complexity of air quality. But and I don't know if it's possible to bring up the slides in the presentation. There was the map illustrating the trend over time, plus the attainments, I think by county, more or less. But I guess as that's being brought up, is it correct to say that not only we not in ozone attainment category, but most metropolitan areas in the state are also not in ozone attainment?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, I was struggling with the hash. Anyway, fine. And then when looking at the target the state has set for us, and then what our current attainment level, I mean, again, parts per million, I recognize it's a very fine measurement, but it seems like we're relatively close. Maybe you could disagree with that. I don't know, by parts per million when it's 0.7 versus 0.708, 0708. You get my drift. Is it fair to say that we are relatively close to our targets? How does that compare to these other areas that are not attainment? Are we closer to attainment and they're further? Or are they much closer and we're lagging? Can you give me some context for how we compare?
Sure. Thank you, Board Member Gloria. So in terms, I guess I'll answer the second question first. So
Okay.
in terms of comparing to those other areas that are on the screen, and I'm going to compare to the major ones, the LA, Bay Area, San Joaquin and South Coast, which is LA, Orange County area. Out of those 5 areas, we're kind of the second best, I guess I would say. So Bay Area is in a little bit better position than we are, but in compared to Sacramento, San Joaquin and South Coast, they're all up above 0.08 ppm or higher. In South Coast, they're at 0.114. So we are in a better position in compared to those areas. However, we do still have some more work to do. It does seem, we are making progress. We are getting close to hitting that target, but I think there's still some more work to do to get to that, to the red line that you're seeing on the screen there, to ultimately get to where we need to go, which is an attainment status.
And to be clear, I'm extremely competitive and absolutely want to get an attainment status. But again, it's helpful to understand not just the contextualization of the progress made by our county, as illustrated by the graph, but how hard it may be to push that small distance, at least relatively speaking, on the graph. Paul, you had a comment?
Yeah, if I could just make a quick comment on that. I appreciate your competitive nature, and we too are trying to attain the standards as quickly as possible. One thing to note is both for this plan and for our federally required state implementation plan, we are able to demonstrate attainment by that 2032 deadline. And that other areas are not so fortunate. They're really struggling because some of those sources, like one of the commenters raised, a lot of these sources are not within the direct control of local air districts. Mm-hmm. And so especially in other areas like the South Coast and San Joaquin, absent reductions in federal sources, federally regulated sources like locomotives, airplanes, they're unable to demonstrate that attainment. Mm-hmm. And so there's a lot of conversations. I raise this because as a lot of you operate in circles with the federal government as well, there's definitely a lot of advocacy to get EPA to clamp down on those sources. So for us, we're able to demonstrate that attainment at this time without that federal assistance, but that could change over time.
Interesting. Well, again, helpful context and helpful as a board member to, how can we get to this attainment? We're close enough. To cut this in half in my lifetime. That's not as used as it used to be. That used to be a short amount of time, but as years go by, you realize that that's a long period of time. But point is, what for this governing body to have that as, okay, this is achievable, this is doable. I think often when we look at environmental standards, sometimes these things are harder to achieve, but this seems relatively attainable, pun intended. And anyway, so I just took a lot from the presentation. I appreciate that. One last question. I'm sorry again if it's fairly elementary, but I heard mention of the location of the measuring in Alpine. And what I took from your comment, and I'm probably reading into it, is that particular location, is that particularly challenging, or does that, it sounded like there was some sensitivities about location when you're mentioning, the nature of our geography, et cetera. Does having an Alpine make it easier or harder for us to do attainment? And again, trying to understand the context of which we're discussing.
Sorry. Sure. If you want to go, Marvis, if you can go back maybe 2 slides to the, that one.
Yeah.
So the picture on the right kind of illustrates the issue with Alpine. So ozone tends to form. We've got the emissions that are being emitted over the city area, the more metropolitan areas. And then that cooler coastal breeze then travels inland along with the emissions. And then it kind of gets trapped up against the foothills where Alpine is. And so that kind of, then the chemical reaction happens, and that's where ozone forms. And it just so happens that Alpine is kind of right at the altitude where that chemical reaction happens. And so they are more, I guess, predisposed to getting higher levels of ozone in comparison to kind of the coastal regions and those that are at lower altitudes.
It's fascinating. I think about going east to get fresh air, right? Get out of the city and And it's also helpful to know that that is probably in the right location in terms of a sensor, right, as opposed to path of least resistance. I mean, I think I could hear a community designer board saying, I don't want this thing in my view shed or something, right? But this is where you'd like it to be to measure, not just for consistency over time, of course, but also because that might be where we would pick up the largest amount of pollution, and therefore that's a good place to measure from. Got it.
Exactly. And EPA does mandate where we put our.
Oh, okay. So we don't have
monitoring.
discretion on that.
We have some discretion, but it's limited. EPA has to approve our regional monitoring network to make sure it's representative of the whole area for that exact reason. So areas don't select, just to measure in certain communities where there would be less pollution. So it is a regional network that's approved by EPA.
Got it. Thank you for the answers. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the time as I kind of get myself more accustomed to this work, and appreciate being the opportunity to be a part of the team to hopefully get us to attainment. Look forward to supporting the motion.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for the questions. Member Gomez.
I actually do not have another question. That member Mayor Gloria asked a question. It was going to be related to the location. I was just curious about that too. I appreciate that.
All right. Any other of my colleagues? All right. With that, then we have a motion by Member Gomez, second by Member Sanchez. Madam Clerk, can you please call the roll?
Thank you, Chair Bush. Member Gloria?
Aye.
Member Gomez?
Yes.
Member Martinez?
Yes.
Member Medina?
Aye.
Member Sanchez?
Aye.
Chair Bush?
Yes.
Thank you. With members Birkbeck Garcia, Elo Rivera, Lawson Remer, Shu, and Vargas absent, that motion passes with all board members who are present voting aye.
Thank you, Marvis. Moving on to agenda item number E3. This is the adoption of proposed new rule 69.7, the landfill gas flares. Madam Clerk, can you please provide the public testimony instructions, and then we'll move on to staff presentation.
Thank you, Chair Bush. I would ask members of the public that have requested to speak on this item to please approach the podium at this time or complete a speaker slip at this time. Those members of the public that are joining us via virtual meeting, please dial into the teleconference line now using the instructions provided on the screen. You may also indicate that you wish to speak on this item by using the raise hand feature at the bottom of the Zoom screen or by pressing *9 now. All public testimony will be heard at the conclusion of the staff presentation.
Okay, thank you. And Mr. Watt?
Thank you, Chair. Item I3 today requests governing board approval for the district's proposed new rule 69.7 to control emissions from landfill gas flares. The board is being asked to adopt a resolution approving the new rule, find that the adoption of the rule is exempt from CEQA requirements, and direct the Air Pollution Control Officer to submit the new rule to the California Air Resources Board and United States Environmental Protection Agency for approval and inclusion in the state implementation plan. I'll now turn it over to Air Quality Engineer Miriam Sanchez, who will provide the presentation.
Thanks, Mike. Good afternoon, Chair Bush and members of the board. My name is Miriam Sanchez, and I am one of the air quality engineers at APCD. Today, I will be presenting an overview of proposed new rule 69.7 landfill gas flares. Next slide, please. As explained in the previous presentation, ozone pollution is formed when air pollutants such as nitrogen oxides known as NOx and volatile organic compounds known as VOCs are emitted from different types of sources and chemically react under the influence of sunlight and heat. To protect the public health, the Environmental Protection Agency, known as EPA, regulates ozone through federal standards. Next slide, please. In the previous presentation, it was mentioned that the EPA has classified the San Diego Air Basin as a severe non-attainment area for ozone. Because of this classification, the district is required to write new regulations to satisfy federal reasonably available control technology requirements, known as RACT, to control emissions from sources that have the potential to emit 25 tons per year or more of NOx, such as landfill gas flares. Additionally, due to the litigation at the federal level, a proposed consent decree now requires the district to submit a landfill gas flare rule to EPA no later than April 30th to avoid possible future region-wide sanctions. Next slide, please. Landfill gas flares serve two basic functions. as an emission control device and as a safety device during unforeseeable and unpreventable emergency situations. As an emission control device, a landfill gas flare burns and destroys greenhouse gases that are given off from the decomposition of waste at a landfill, such as methane and carbon dioxide gas. When a flare burns landfill gas flare at high temperatures, NOx and carbon monoxide are produced as byproducts. A common alternative to flaring at landfill facilities throughout the county includes using landfill gas to generate power. Next slide, please. Proposed new Rule 69.7 would apply to all landfill gas flares at municipal solid waste landfills where the aggregate or actual or potential emissions from such flares are at or above the 25 tons per year of NOx. It is not intended to regulate landfills or their landfill gas collection system because those are already being regulated separately through other district, state, and federal regulations. The proposed new rule would require emissions from these flares to not exceed 0.06 pounds per million BTU of NOx and 0.2 pounds per million BTU of carbon monoxide. These new emission standards would establish the most stringent limits in a non-extreme, non-attainment area in California for landfill gas flares. Next slide, please. Proposed new Rule 69.7 will specify operational, continuous monitoring, record keeping, and source test requirements for landfill gas flares subject to the rule. The owner or operator of a landfill gas flare will be required to continuously monitor and record exhaust temperature, landfill gas flow rate, and presence of a flame. Records of all required monitoring must be kept on site for at least 5 years. These proposed requirements are consistent with the California Air Resources Board methane emissions from municipal solid waste landfills regulation and other applicable federal regulations. Proposed new Rule 69.7 would also go beyond existing regulations to now require source testing for NOx and carbon monoxide on an ongoing basis. This will ensure that flares subject to the rule will continue to adhere to and maintain stringent emission standards for NOx and carbon monoxide, where such limits do not exist today. New landfill gas flares installed at new facilities in the San Diego County in the future will be subject to existing new source review permit requirements, which require best available control technology and thus need to meet the lowest available NOx limit that is cost effective. Next slide, please. There are 3 landfills, each with 2 flares in the San Diego County that would be subject to the proposed new rule. This includes Ota Landfill, located in Chula Vista, Sycamore Landfill near Santee, and Miramar Landfill in the city of San Diego. Ota and Sycamore are privately owned facilities, whereas Miramar is owned and operated by the city of San Diego. All existing flares operational at these facilities currently meet the proposed emission standards. Staff conducted outreach to all landfill owners and operators in San Diego County, including targeted outreach to each of the 3 mentioned landfills. A workshop was also recently conducted, which was publicly noticed on the district's website, social media, and distributed to over 9,000 interested parties throughout the district's electronic mail service. EPA and the California Air Resources Board, known as CARB, participated in the rule development process, provided comments, and both are comfortable with the district's proposal. Next slide, please. 3 main goals will be accomplished upon adoption of proposed new Rule 69.7. First, it will ensure that stringent NOx and CO emission controls for equipment are properly maintained at existing facilities. Second, it will ensure that existing flares are not replaced with more polluting devices in the future. And finally, adoption of the proposed new rule will make sure emission standards are federally enforceable by the EPA to satisfy REC requirements that such controls are accounted for in the San Diego County portion of the state implementation plan, known as SIP, and would satisfy requirements in the proposed federal consent decree to avoid region-wide sanctions. Next slide, please. In closing, today's recommendations for your consideration are: 1, to find that the proposal is exempt from the California Environmental Quality Act, CEQA. 2, adopt the proposed new Rule 69.7 and resolution as proposed. And 3rd, direct the Air Pollution Control Officer to forward a copy of the new Rule 69.7 and the resolution to CARB for approval and submittal to EPA for inclusion into the SIP. Next slide, please. This concludes the staff presentation. We're available to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate that. At this point, are there any technical questions from our board? Seeing none, Mark. Oh, is there? Yes, Member Medina.
I guess I'll call them technical. Thank you for the presentation earlier in the week where you explained the rule, made me do some homework. I think as Sanchez kind of referred to, that there's kind of an overlap with a lot of other regulations. And so my question was, there are some things that are not mentioned in this rule that I assume would be mentioned in a similar rule. So the first question is, are these facilities subject to the landfill methane regulation of CARB? Okay.
Yes, these facilities, I believe, are all subject to the LMR rule, if that's the one that you're referring to.
Yes. Okay. So that covers some of the things that would not, like for instance, there's a 99%, I can't remember if it's control efficiency or destruction efficiency on that rule. That's not mentioned in our rule, but they're covered anyway, right?
Correct. And that's a state, California Air Resources Board rule that is one of the rules that we have an MOU in agreement with to enforce on behalf of the state as well, in addition to the mobile source rules we've discussed previously. So our staff, even though that's a state regulation, are helping to enforce that regulation locally.
Okay, great. And related to that, CARB mentioned on their website that they have a memoranda of understanding with a number of districts. Are we one of those? Yes.
Correct. Yes.
Okay, great. Those are my questions. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Member Medina. Public comments.
Thank you, Chair Bush. I've received no request to speak here in the board chamber. However, if there are any members of the public that wish to address the board on this item that are in our virtual meeting, please go ahead and raise your hand at this time. We have one member of the public that wishes to address the board on this item. I'd like to call John Botorff to go ahead and unmute yourself at this time. You will have 3 minutes to address the board.
Good afternoon. This is John with the CleanEarthForKids.org, and we call on you to protect human health and climate by requiring lower NOx standards. The report states that staff considered a lower NOx standard, but stated it was cost prohibitive. That is not acceptable. Our air quality must be more important than profits. Please take a step forward and set world-class standards for air quality. Show the world that clean air is a priority in San Diego. You can at least set the standard for NOx at 0.025 like the South Coast and San Joaquin Valley districts. That is the least you can do. Setting it any higher is just not acceptable. Please put our air quality, which again, we have some of the worst air in the nation in San Diego County. We need to put our air quality higher above people making money. Thank you from CleanEarthForKids.org.
Thank you. That concludes public testimony on this item.
All right. Thank you, Marvis. Any other board member comments? Yes, Member Sanchez.
Yeah, I was wondering if any of the landfills had commented on this. I didn't see anything in the packet.
No, we didn't receive any comments from
Okay.
from any of these landfills.
Well, they must be all in compliance. I move staff's recommendations. I think it's a great idea.
All right. We have a motion from Member Sanchez. Can I get a second?
I'll make a second, and I have a question,
Yes.
a non-technical question.
All right. So we have a motion and a second on the floor, Member Medina.
The economic analysis that was done mentioned that this rule would have a reduction, a cost efficiency of reduced NOx of 31 cents a pound. And so my question is, if they're already complying, where is the reduction and where is that cost coming from? How is that figured out if all the facilities are already in compliance, so that means they don't have to do anything else. And maybe I'm misunderstanding it, so if you can clarify that.
No, thank you, Board Member Bradina. I'll try to unpack that question. It's a good one you've caught on to. So these facilities do meet the 0.06 NOx standard. Really, the reductions are coming from a change in the emission factor that is being used for our emission inventory, which assumes those facilities are emitting at 0.08. So there is going to be on paper emission reductions happening just in adjustments of our inventory. And then in terms of the costs related in relation to that question, there is some cost borne to the facilities just in the additional source testing requirements that they will have to do. These facilities, as I understand, they already do source testing because of the landfill the LMR regulation. However, they only do it for methane at this current time. So when they do their normal source tests, as they continue to do them, they will have to add an additional component to also look at NOx. So there is a little bit extra cost associated, but not a whole lot as the metric says at 31 cents a pound.
Could you also explain a little bit what happens if the facility wants to change or upgrade equipment and what they would be subject to?
Sure. So if the facility wants to, let's say, change or upgrade to their equipment, they would potentially be subject to our permitting program, which is called the New Source Review Permitting Program, NSR for short. So in that case, the facility would possibly need to procure a more stringent emission control device at the time that old device is replaced. And so that is an example of where where the commenter was noting that the 0.025 level, where that device would potentially need to be installed if they are subject to the NSR requirements at that point.
Thank you. That's all.
All right, thank you, Member Medina. Any other further board comments before we call roll? Seeing none, call roll, please.
Thank you. Member Gloria?
Aye.
Member Gomez?
Yes.
Member Martinez?
Yes.
Member Medina?
Aye.
Member Member Sanchez?
Aye.
Chair Bush?
Yes.
Thank you. With members Burkett Garcia, Elo Rivera, Lawson Remer, Shu, and Vargas absent, that motion passes with all board members who are present voting aye.
Thank you. Moving on to agenda item E4, adoption of the 2023 legislative program for the San Diego County Air Pollution Control District. Madam Clerk, can you please provide the public testimony before we get the staff presentation?
Thank you, Chair Bush. I would ask members of the public that have requested to speak on this item to please approach the podium at this time or complete a speaker slip at this time. Those members of the public that are joining us via teleconference, please dial into the conference line now using the instructions provided on the Zoom screen. You may also indicate that you wish to speak on this item by using the raise hand feature at the bottom of your Zoom screen or by pressing *9 now. All public testimony will be heard at the conclusion of the staff presentation.
All right, thank you, Marvis. And as you pull up the next presentation, we'll go ahead and turn it over to our Air Pollution Control Officer, Ms. Paula Forbes. So, Ms. Forbes, you can begin when you're ready.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair Bush, and thank you, board members. It's great to see you all in person today. And
Yes.
This agenda item is a proposal for a legislative program for the district for 2023. And it is modeled after the county legislative program. Previously, APCD as part of the county was always filtered up and folded up into the county program. And so this is our first legislative program proposal as an independent agency. And this is the first of what is going to be an annual program that we'll be bringing before you to guide our efforts and provide policy direction. Because as you all know, legislation at the state and federal level can move very quickly. So we want to be ready to respond when it's proposed. Next slide, please. So the Planning and Policy Committee was created by your board last year in November and tasked with development of these legislative guidelines. The committee met on February 23rd of this year and considered a draft program and added an additional priority for additional funding for AB 617. And we've talked with your board several times about that program. That's obviously been a priority for our advocacy. The structure of the legislative program involves three different types of activities that we would pursue in response to legislation. The first, we'll go through these each individually, but they are the sponsorship proposals, federal and state legislative priorities, and policy guideline statements. Next slide, please. So first, we'll talk about the legislative sponsorship proposals. This would represent the highest level of effort for APCD staff. And so this is really for the highest priority issues for the district as a whole. Once a sponsorship proposal is approved by the governing board, we would work to secure an author for the legislation and work with them to develop bill language. And so some examples of what might involve a sponsorship proposal would be increasing funding to support our programs and our operations, other types of additional emission reductions, especially for underserved communities, or other policy issues identified by the APCD governing board. And so we don't have in this proposal to bring to you today sponsorship proposals. As I mentioned, this is our first annual legislative program. And so we anticipate bringing the 2024 legislative program to you by the end of this calendar year. And then at that time, that timing could allow for us to identify some sponsorship proposals given opportunities and available resources. Next slide, please. So there are a number of proposed legislative priorities that are detailed in the program. This is the second category of potential legislative activity that we would pursue. And legislative priorities identify those issue areas for which we anticipate legislation or administrative action, or for which we would like to take a position of support, oppose, or watch. And we could also be asked to co-sponsor legislation, working directly with the legislative sponsor and author. And so some examples of potential activities are listed here, but I'd like to quickly walk through the ones that we've detailed in the program itself. Next slide, please. So the first one to flag, and this again was added by the Planning and Policy Committee. It was reflected in the guidelines, but suggested that we reflect it here as a priority. This is our AB 617 funding. And this has been, as I mentioned, a key priority for our advocacy at the state level. We've been working with the California Air Pollution Control Officers Association, or CAPCOA is the easier way to say that. That's the statewide association of local air districts. We've been working this year with them on advocacy efforts around the state budget. I'm pleased to report that last year's efforts have resulted in additional funding for this program. So we're anticipating an additional $4.25 million to be allocated to our international border community that would fund development of the community emission reduction program in that area. So that's great news, but we continue to advocate on this program. And with projected revenue shortfalls at the state level, we're hoping to be able to keep our funding at least where it is for the coming year and potentially augment it in future years. I also wanted to quickly flag there is a bill, AB 849, that has been proposed by the South Coast Air Quality Management District that would add funding for community steering committees to be able to pursue facilitation, translation services, kind of the administrative costs that go along with those committees. So we would see that bill as consistent with this priority and look to take a support position on that if this is approved. Next slide, please. So the next priority to flag for you is vessel speed reduction. This refers to ocean-going vessels. And there has been legislation proposed, AB 953, which would create a voluntary vessel speed reduction program along the entire coast of California. There's currently such a program in the communities of, or in the counties of Santa Barbara, Ventura, and in the Bay Area. And this would expand that program to the entire California coast. Ocean-going vessels are the largest source of NOx emissions. So as we're looking at trying to reach ozone standards, it is important for us to be thinking of ways, creative ways, again, to reach the sources that we don't regulate. And just lowering the speed of those vessels results in really significant reductions in NOx emissions. Also provides additional protection and to whales, reduces vessel strikes on whales, and reduces noise pollution to marine life. So we're recommending a support in concept for this legislation. Next slide, please. So the next couple of priorities to highlight for you are anticipated. We have not seen specific language on these, though there are spot bills that have been introduced, and we're anticipating seeing language in the next few weeks. The first one is would increase registration fees on motor vehicles across the state. And currently, when you pay your registration, there's a $4 fee that comes to the local air district. This bill, it would propose to increase that by an additional $4. The current $4 fee has been static in state law for about 30 years. And locally, we've had that $4 fee for about 10 or 12 years. And so it has not increased over that time, even though the mandates on local districts have increased. So there is a proposal that would increase that fee and bring additional funds to district operations for mobile source programs. The next one to mention is a goods movement related cargo fee, and this would apply to containers coming into our local port. Again, it would apply statewide and would put a fee of the proposal is $100 on each container that is brought into a port in California, with the goal being that that funding come to local air districts for emission reduction projects in portside areas. So we see that as important for our portside environmental justice community, and we would recommend support of that. Again, we don't have language on that one specifically, so it would be a support and concept at this point. Next slide, please. And the next priority to highlight for you is one that's anticipated. This is called the Cleaner Air Spaces Act, or CASA. This is likely to be introduced at the federal level by Congressman Scott Peters, and it's designed to provide funding for clean air spaces to address public health impacts from wildfire smoke. And so it would provide grants to local cleaner air spaces programs, which would provide at least 1,000 free air filters and replacement filters to low-income households. So that's actually modeled after our portside air improvement program, our PAIR program, Air Quality Improvement and Relief Program. And then it also would require establishment of one public clean air center, somewhat like the California program that's currently in place. And so, again, we see this as an important for public health in the event of a wildfire to have funding to establish these centers. So we recommend support of this program should it be introduced. Next slide, please. So finally, I wanted to mention briefly the legislative guidelines, and these are much more general policy statements that guide the positions that APCD staff is able to take, and ones that may come to our attention during the course of a legislative year. We've flagged issues here that tend to recur on a year-to-year basis. And as you know, legislation can move very quickly. We want to be able to take positions that reflect the policy direction of the governing board without having a delay in getting back to the governing board to seek that approval. The draft program contains guidelines in 5 priority issue areas: air quality, environmental justice, public health, climate change, and funding. Next slide, please. And here we have listed a few examples of these. And as I mentioned, these are very general statements to provide policy guidance to us in the event that legislation is introduced. And so one that I did want to flag for you that we just became aware of yesterday, this is a bill that was recently introduced and brought to our attention yesterday, AB 1372 that was introduced by Assemblymember Alvarez would prohibit the California Air Resources Board from enforcing key provisions of their regulations to require gradual conversion to ZEVs for heavy-duty trucks in the California-Mexico border area. And that's a we have strong concerns with the proposed legislation and the potential impacts it would have in delaying very much needed reductions in diesel particulate matter in our international border community. It would conflict with several of our draft guidelines. And so I think 3 of them are up there in front of you today. The first 3 listed here would promote prompt electrification of vehicle fleets in California, promote environmental justice initiatives, reduce air toxic emissions and cumulative health risk impacts from those emissions, especially in underserved communities. So we would find that the legislation as proposed would be in conflict with these 3 guidelines and likely more. And so we would recommend an opposed position on this legislation if these guidelines are adopted. Next slide, please. So a requested action for you today is to consider and adopt the 2023 legislative program. And that concludes my overview, and I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you, Ms. Forbes. Do we have any questions from my colleagues before we move on to public comment? All right, seeing none.
Just a minute. Okay. Thank you. We have one member of the public that is here in person that would like to speak to the board, Nicholas Paul. You'll have 3 minutes to address the board. And please begin by stating your name for the record. We also have 2 speakers that are joining us virtually that I will call after Mr. Paul.
All right, thank you. So EHC supports in concept the legislative program presented to this body today. We appreciate the inclusion of the AB 617 funding advocacy in the state legislative priority list, and we'll continue to monitor the bills included in the program as they develop over the coming year. As Chief Air Pollution Control Officer Paula Forbes mentioned, EHC is extremely concerned about AB 1372. EHC requests that this governing board also take a position in opposition to this bill, which was introduced by Assemblymember David Alvarez. The bill proposes to prohibit CARB from enforcing any regulations requiring the purchase and use of heavy-duty zero-emission vehicles operating at the land port of entry at the California-Mexico border. The bill appears to be an attempt to nullify the requirements of the proposed Advanced Clean Fleets Rule in the border region. The Advanced Clean Fleets Rule will be voted on by CARB in April. Much of the air pollution and greenhouse gas emissions in California and San Diego results from the transportation sector, with medium and heavy-duty trucks being among the highest emitters. Nearly 1 million heavy-duty trucks cross the U.S.-Mexico border and at the Otay Mesa border crossing every year. In California, these trucks only account for about 12% of the total truck population, but they represent about 48% of the total NOx emissions. The Advanced Clean Fleets Rule will require transition to zero-emission trucks via requirements of truck purchases starting in 2028 and up to 2042, depending on the size of the truck fleet and the age of the trucks. So there's adequate time to plan for and execute these transitions. As of October 2022, there are more than 148 zero-emission vehicles available for order in the US. They are available in every vehicle weight class category in a wide variety of configurations. There are more than 500 zero-emission vehicle models available worldwide, and we expect more each year. EHC requests that the San Diego Air Pollution Control Board express strong opposition to AB 1372, as it will allow trucks operating in the border region where diesel particulate pollution is significant to be exempted from the ACF rule and any other zero-emission vehicle rules. This is a clear attack on environmental justice communities, and EHC appreciates the board's consideration of our request. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is John Batorf. You will have 3 minutes to address the board. Please begin by stating your name for the record.
Good afternoon. My name is John Batorf with CleanEarthForKids.org. And first things first, I actually want to state our opposition to California House Bill AB 1372, and we absolutely think that you guys should oppose it as well. It's not acceptable to stop the enforcement of ZEV truck regulations, particularly the harm that's done to a lot of our sensitive communities by large trucks and the diesel emissions. We absolutely believe you guys should oppose that. There's a number of other California and federal legislation that we think you should support. One, that you should ask the EPA to adopt the WHO, the World Health Organization standards for their national ambient air quality standards for particulate matter. You should also support the California House Bill AB 935 to phase out all tobacco sales in California. Support federal Senate Bill 269, which is Protect America's Children from Toxic Pesticides, as pesticide drift is a direct threat to human and environmental health. Also support California Senate Bill 252 to divest state pensions from fossil fuels, and California Senate Bill SB 529 to create programs for EV sharing at affordable multifamily housing, and Senate Bill 49 to provide tax incentives to build solar arrays over large parking lots for local generation of clean electricity. As we had spoken about earlier, as far as legislation to sponsor, we absolutely believe APCD needs to take action to stop gas and wood fireplaces and stoves in new construction and renovations. Other air districts have already done this, so you're not having to reinvent the wheel. And create incentives to replace gas and wood burning fireplaces and stoves in existing homes. And not just replace them with other gas or wood burners. They need to be removed. We need to stop burning things to protect our air. And lastly, to sponsor legislation to stop the sale, storage, and use of leaded aviation fuel. Lead is a horrible pollutant, as we talked about earlier, and it's in our air here in San Diego. And as the Air Pollution Control District, you need to take action to protect our air. Thank you from Clean Earth for Kids.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Suzanne Hume. You will have 3 minutes to address the board. Please begin by stating your name for the record.
There we go. I'm so sorry for the delay. My name is Suzanne Hume. I'm the educational director and founder of Clean Earth for Kids. And what I would like to say is, obviously we need clean air now, not by 2025, not by 2027, not by 2032. And the actions, there are so many free actions that we can take today, like stopping wood smoke, like we talked about, and at the beaches and the cities and the mayors and people in that room are deciding, the air that we breathe, and the health of our children and their ability to learn. Stanford professor talked about, we have so many studies on our website, and I had a comment and I lost my place, so I'm just going to speak off the cuff. Anyway, the Stanford professor talks about how wood smoke also affects children's psychiatric condition and their mental health. And students are reported saying that their workouts are shorter, they can't, breathe. They have twinges of chest pain, etc. So we can take action now on our air. In terms of state and federal priorities, so definitely the things that John just mentioned, and also, taking action to phase out tobacco sales, all of those sorts of things, really important. About the state priorities, so very important to reduce the AB 935 to reduce vessel speeds, to reduce NOx, and air pollution will also save whales. And so, of course, we're in strong support of that. And the other, the state legislative priorities that you listed regarding motor vehicles, the movement of goods, the funding of AB 617, reducing vehicle miles traveled. So, and onto the federal policies, including clean air spaces, like I said, reducing VMT, and sources of mobile emissions, funding electric vehicles and EV chargers. This is so important. We need EV chargers in North County and San Diego for equity. This is super important. We need people that are renting to be able to go and charge vehicles if they are not able to charge at home. And as mentioned before, really important, the EPA, the San Diego Air Pollution Control District, please write a letter adopting the World Health Organization air quality guidelines for 2021 for PM 2.55 or less annually, and also ask this for the daily standard. And this is so important. PM 2.5 is deadly, right? Little bits of pollution. It's a really important thing that you can do. And thank you again. So sorry I lost my place and my notes, but anyway, clean air saves lives. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That concludes public testimony on this item.
All right, thank you, Marvis, and really want to thank staff and our Planning and Policy Committee for all of their work on getting this together. Really proud of us as an organization for being so proactive on these issues. It keeps coming up that the biggest source of pollution, of air pollution, it's mobile sources, but we all know that we don't have direct regulatory authority over that. So that's why it's so important to be involved, to be proactive on these issues. One recent example was of a project that came up was the Mitsubishi Cement Corporation plan that was proposed on Port of San Diego tidelands in the Barrio Logan community, which we all know is very impacted when it comes to health impacts and air pollution. And so it's really appreciative of staff, really reviewing that and really speaking out and providing oversight based on the facts of that and the potential hazards and the inconsistencies with their plans. So it's just so important for us to do that. That isn't to oppose industry or be in opposition for the sake of it, but it is for accountability. We're here to protect people's health, and that's what we got to prioritize. And with that, I do have concerns about AB 1372. So I did just find out about it as well yesterday, and just want to read a bit of the summary text so that that we have that, because it to me actually does sound directly conflicting with what our goals and what our issues are, and even just inconsistent with what the issues were with this cement corporation plant that would have all these diesel trucks polluting, these neighborhoods. We want to promote EVs. And so this bill before this is a summary, January 1st, 2026, prohibit the state board, which is California Air Resource Board, from enforcing any regulations requiring the purchase and use of zero emission vehicles with a gross weight rating of over 8,500 pounds operating in a land port of entry on the California-Mexico border within a commercial zone as defined. There's a lot of other texts that I won't read out loud and get into. But that does absolutely concern me, and I do agree with staff recommendation that we should take opposition. I also think that I want to respect Assemblymember David Alvarez. He's my representative, so and I appreciate the work he does on this. I did communicate with him this morning, and he got back to me asking that we not oppose, that we give him a chance to explain. And I didn't get a chance to respond back, but I really think I wanted to disclose that to my colleagues, and I still think we should oppose this. I want to communicate with Assemblymember Alvarez, but he didn't reach out to me, and I did speak to the executive director, and correct me if I'm wrong, Ms. Forbes, but the assembly member and his staff did not reach out to you about this issue, right?
That's correct.
Okay, and I haven't asked Environmental Health Coalition or any of the other groups yet, so I just haven't had, we just found out about this, and I think, for me, I'm open to reconsidering the position, and that doesn't mean that we stop working with him. But at this point, this is where it's at. I think for any of our assembly members, any elected officials, they have the opportunity to reach out to the Air Pollution Control District Board. That wasn't done, so this is where it's at. It's not personal. I think we can still work with him, but with that, and I want to hear my colleagues' comments. I'm open to discussion on this, but I do want to make a motion to adopt the 2023 legislative program attachment A with the added inclusion of opposition to AB 1372.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second, and definitely open it up to discussion. I want to hear from my colleagues on this. Member Gomez and then Member Sanchez.
Thank you. Thank you, Steph, and very excited that we're here creating a program and hopefully giving direction to staff to really utilize our ability to leverage Sacramento and how we benefit and bring more resources to really implement our agenda to address air quality overall, specifically in EJ communities. Definitely very supportive of having an active role in opposing maybe 1372. And I want to express that I want to recognize actually the work that the community, along with a couple of the CARB members that are San Diego leaders, both County Supervisor Chair Vargas and Diane Teclorian representing our region at CARB, and how hard they worked to expand on AB 617 to incorporate the border, right? And there's been decades of wanting to lift the border as important, the importance that it has, but also recognize that there's also some issues related to air quality, right? And I think this bill that is being presented would take us backwards. And I think it's extremely dangerous, not only for the border and air quality, but also just what it could mean for other work that is being had to reduce air quality, and electrification is very much on the center of those solutions, like what the port is doing, and then many other agencies, not only just here, but statewide. So I just think that definitely this bill can create a lot of issues, not only at the border, but in many other locations. So hopefully it doesn't get adopted and it gets pulled back, and really, instead of trying to prevent, we should be being more proactive and discussing ideas and how we can utilize the state to bring more resources to really help us implement reduction. So I really appreciate this and appreciate the acknowledgement of this bill, and I'm hopeful that we'll take an active position, and that we need to do more specifically to our impacted AB 617 communities. I think they're asking, and it's time that we start doing better. So thank you.
Thank you, Member Gomez. We'll have Member Sanchez, Member Gloria, and then Member Medina.
Thank you. I do want to thank Member Gomez and the Planning and Policy Committee for bringing this forward. And education and advocacy truly must be part of the provisions of what APCD is all about. So I'm really very appreciative that this is yet another thing that our board will be doing. So, and I had heard about 1372 actually this morning. So I was, I'm really glad that it was brought up at this hearing. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Member Sanchez. Member Gloria.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to staff for this presentation. I'm glad to see that this agency will have a program to be active at the state and federal level. I think very important. And what you laid out here makes a tremendous amount of sense. I think one question, do we have a representation, a lobbyist or something in Sacramento or in DC?
No, not at this time.
Okay.
Well, yes.
Looking at us is my strong suspicion. A part of why I want to ask that. So first off, I'm fine with the legislative program. I think it provides the flexibility you ought to have. My city council gives me similar authorities, speaking to general notions about what's important to the city, and then allowing us the flexibility to be as reactive as has been mentioned multiple times. It's a fast and dynamic environment, and sometimes you have to move quickly to support or oppose something. Totally get that. With regard to the legislation that's been mentioned by Assemblymember Alvarez, I wasn't familiar with this issue until hearing this hearing. I tried to get on my phone to just look at it, and I can see the concern. A question I would have is maybe just a fundamental question in terms of Brown Act. I mean, are we able to take a specific action today on that precise bill, given that it's not a part of today's agenda?
I will, I have checked in with council on that. I'll let her answer that question. Is she on? She can't hear me? Oh,
I'll take it
okay.
from
So
you.
we lost council.
Okay.
I will tell you what she told me earlier today, which, because I had this exact question come up. And so she responded that because the legislative program as a whole is coming in front of this board, that it was well within Brown Act for you to take a specific position on that legislation as well.
I think it's also true though, so I get that, may worry a little bit about that, but I ain't an attorney, so we'll deal with that. Because of the latitude provided under the proposed legislative program, you would have the ability, if we were silent on the matter today, to be able to take action if the bill in its form is given a hearing is something that's objectionable. This current program as proposed would allow you that ability without the specific direction on this particular bill.
Yes, Member Gloria, that's correct. That's why I highlighted a few of the guidelines that we felt it was in conflict with, is that even without a specific statement from this board, we would feel empowered to take a position on it consistent with those guidelines.
I was picking up what you were putting down, so I got that part. So I might make just the suggestion to this group. I'm a little concerned about taking definitive action on the bill. Just my surface reading in the state's website is not it is not exhaustive. However, I would be interested, and I've heard there's not been a tremendous amount of communication, what the assembly member's intent is, what he's trying to accomplish. Is the bill as it's currently in print, what he intends to present, if he intends to present it at all. And to the extent that a positive relationship with our state delegation, I think is important. While I would understand the frustration, given that the staff recommendation, absent the additional direction, provides you the latitude to oppose it, I see there's the potential for a public hearing later this month. I think that if the bill remains in its current format, I would understand completely why you would oppose it, and I would support you in opposing that. I just wonder if there's an opportunity here for additional conversations with the author in hopes of understanding and perhaps persuading to make the bill something that we could support, assuming there's a world where that is. If there's not, and it stays in the exact position, 100%, please oppose it. Doesn't match what I think we should do. But without the benefit of direct representation in Sacramento, sometimes these messages, as the chair was mentioning, if it's not relayed in a particular matter, it's easy to also get offended in the other direction. It seemed to me that with at least 2 weeks plus of runway to work with, maybe we can attempt to do that, understanding that you would be authorized to oppose it if we don't get amendments that we're interested in, or perhaps, again, I think you all know these bills can be turned into other vehicles for other purposes. If that's the particular case, I wouldn't be surprised. And all of a sudden we would have no need to weigh in, if that makes sense. But on the whole, I would say, let's move forward with the proposed legislative proposal as is. I would recommend leaving 1372. The fact that I don't know the bill is probably enough to tell you that we probably have some more work to do. Be silent on it, understanding you're authorized to take action. If the board wants, if the maker of the motion, seconder, wants to keep it the way it is, totally fine. I would just ask to abstain on that particular item on the bill.
I appreciate that, Member Gloria, and I think we do have to be nuanced about it, right? We want to maintain good relationships with our legislatures, and so, but at the same time, I think it's the accountability part of it for me. That's why it's definitely a balance. I definitely respect your opinion on that, but I appreciate the caution about Brown Act. So we actually were able, it sounds like, to get council back on to address that issue.
Thank you, Chair Bush. So I think I heard that there was a question for council, but I dropped off right when when the question was asked. So would you mind repeating the question?
Sorry, we were commiserating. Is this board properly noticed today to take a position on AB, 1372? Correct, got it. The motion currently is inclusive of that specific action, but the board agenda doesn't speak to that specifically.
Yes, I think that the board can take action on that because the agenda item is to consider a legislative program that would be responsive to all legislation at the state or federal level. And I think that this falls within that description. It's also, as Paula pointed out, generally in that section 3. So we're just basically moving the concepts from section 3 to something more specific in section 2 of the legislative program. I think it fairly apprises the public that any legislation that's currently moving forward in the state or federal arenas would be something that the board might be interested in.
Thank you for that feedback.
Thank you for council for that. And Member Medina.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you for the legislative program and my colleagues' comments. One thing that I would like to say is that the effects of this proposed legislation, as we understand it now, which of course is incomplete, doesn't stop at the border. We live in a binational air basin. And so any impacts to air quality, especially along the border, will also affect the communities in Tijuana that we work with in my role as a EHC board of directors member. And we have a long standing relationship with some groups down there. And one of the things that they're always fighting is transportation issues from, cargo trucks from the maquiladora industry. So to the extent that anything like that would result in higher levels of pollutions in those communities, I would be very concerned. One of the things that I've learned being on this board is that we can also request a staff report on certain issues. And I'm wondering whether that would be something that you would, in opposing a bill, you would prepare a report on what the impacts of it would be. And if maybe that is something that we can look at if there is time. And I understand that this being early enough in the process that I don't think it's going to come to any vote of the state assembly next week, or maybe even in a month or so. So maybe that's something that my colleagues would want to entertain as a way to get more information on this. And I support everybody's role. Idea here that you, as the air pollution control officer, have the right to take a position on the issue. So without affecting that, if we can get a report, that would be great.
Mayor Medina, I appreciate that. And just, I'm open to, changing things or hear on the motion or hearing more. But what was the specific kind of idea or suggestion that you had with the report?
Yeah, to get a staff report on what the impacts of this 1372 would be on, first of all, in the AB 617 community along the border, but also on air quality in our region, as a modification of the motion to oppose.
So is there a suggestion to pause opposing or still move forward with opposing, but then have kind of this separate action or bring back this report at our next meeting, or kind of, just trying to flesh out what our actions, what next steps? Because like I said, I'm open to hearing ideas from you all.
Well, if we have time to understand it better, that would be, being a techie person, I would like to know what the real impacts would be, numbers and data. On principle, I am very troubled by it and I am opposed to it, but I don't understand it very well. So if we can modify our motion to direct staff to bring up a report back, and while still giving the APCO the authority to then oppose it if the time comes before we meet again.
Chair Bush, just in case it's helpful to the board, there are actually 3 options that are in the legislative proposal. The first is to support. The second would be to oppose, but there's a third option called to watch. So if that's helpful, that could, be a direction to staff to basically monitor the proposal. And if it doesn't change from its current draft, then we could shift to oppose.
Okay, thank you, Council, for that suggestion. Member Martinez, and then we can go back around. This is a good, a healthy discussion.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, staff, for the presentation. I love that we have this framework, and I appreciate all the my colleagues that worked on getting us to have these priorities. Regarding the AB 1372, just wanted to give some maybe options because I agree with everything my colleagues have said. So I'm okay with waiting, getting more information. I'm also okay with our with Ms. Forbes taking a position when the time comes, or if we want to proceed today, making it very clear, sending a clear message that this is a problematic legislation, even though we don't have a lot of information, which I would like to have information. This is the first that I've heard about it at this meeting, so I feel like it's fair to get more information personally. But another option would be I support the watch or the oppose unless amended. That's another position that we could take. So just throwing some possibilities out there. I'm open, but I also like the idea of pausing and getting more information, considering that this is the first time I've heard about it. So just wanted to share those comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Martinez. And going back around the horn before I go back to my comments, Member Gomez.
Yeah, and I do appreciate the comments by my colleagues. I do think that as a air quality body, there's an air quality bill in front of us. We might not be familiar with it, but it's not that extensive. It's literally a bill that the language states that it would not allow CARB to implement zero emission trucks. It basically is, it's tying the hands of our state agency to move forward and how they're going to implement the scoping plan to achieve states AB 32 requirements. That literally is what it is. There's nothing much to it aside from because infrastructure, if the infrastructure is not there, right? And I get it, we need to do a lot in the infrastructure. But I think from an air quality perspective, I think this body I feel like there's an obligation to have a presence in Sacramento to speak on it. So if we don't have a stance and we're waiting to see what happens, I just don't think the message from an air quality lens is going to be present because we're waiting, right? We should be carrying, we should be being proactive. And I would say I appreciate the follow-up that you said in terms of perhaps oppose it unless it changes significantly. I'm okay with that. Just right now, and I'm gonna go back to what I said, there was a lot of work that went into including the border to be added to a community of concern. And CARB is starting to spend money at the border to reduce air pollution. And I just feel that if there's a bill that could change or could not, right now it is what it is. I just think that this body needs to be, the department needs to be proactive to ensure that, it either gets amended or it gets pulled back, one of the two. But if we're not there, then that's not going to happen.
Thank you, Member Gomez. Member Sanchez, Medina, and then back to Member Martinez before I close out and call the question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The concerns that I heard this morning at the Sandag retreat basically were surprised that this would be happening now because they were almost like on notice for 10 years. They've known for 10 years this was coming. And then all of a sudden we have this. I do agree with the comments that this is about CARB. And this is, basically a jurisdiction, so to speak, and for something that would impact CARB in such a negative way. would severely also impact us. So we're talking about the health and safety of a community that is especially at risk. That's why I seconded the motion. Thank you.
Understood. Thank you. Member Medina.
Yes, I also support going ahead with the motion. And, I'm concerned for the community. That's my first thing. And also we are an air quality board. So that is a convincing argument for me.
Thank you. And Member Martinez. Oh, got it. Thank you. So yes, Member Martinez was pointing out that yes, Ms. Forbes wanted to speak. So sorry, I missed you. Paula.
No, that's okay. I just wanted to put another thought and option out as the board is considering the motion. And that is that in November, you did delegate to the Planning and Policy Committee the ability to take positions on legislation if it was needed from a timing perspective, and then report that back to the governing board. So that is another option. We will be scheduling a meeting of the Planning and Policy Committee in April. In the interim, obviously, as I mentioned, the guidelines provide that flexibility and the ability for the district to weigh in with concerns, take whatever position, the board decides to direct today, or take, a position that's consistent with those guidelines as they're adopted. And then finally, I'm happy to bring a report back if that's what the board would ask. At the April Planning and Policy Committee or at the May Governing Board meeting, as the board would like.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Forbes. Member Gloria.
So, Chair, thank you. Not to belabor the point, my understanding of the staff recommendation, it would authorize you to oppose this without the additional direction. If the board wants to take this particular action, I do think the appropriate one is oppose unless amended. I realize that wasn't. I don't think that's the thing. Is that cool based on what we've said? Well, that may be a technical term,
that's fine.
I'm trying to make this go down a little bit smoother. I served in the legislature. I understand how actions like this take. I guarantee you, to Member Gomez's comments, it will get attention quickly, and we want to weigh in and make the concerns known. My hope is that, again, as we're starting out a legislative policy platform for this organization, that we're finding allies, that we're influencing the process, and we're a part of wanting to get the outcomes that we want. I do think a hard oppose, which we fundamentally are ideologically, let's let the record, whoever's recording this, no, there's not a member of this board that's saying we're into this. We're all opposed. But what I want us to do is to influence the process. There's probably no world where the bill as it's currently described is going to be something we'll support. If this turned into some sort of study bill, some sort of legislative or budget play of some kind to help effectuate clean air stuff, this would be the kind of stuff that I wish we had the author or their staff here to tell us what the overall intention is. I think a lot of us probably know this process, know that isn't always abundantly clear by what is in writing, at least at this point in the legislative process. If you were asking me this question in May, that would be entirely different. I think we would know fully what the intent is. And if it's what it is today, I'd be the first to say no, thank you. So I would hope that the oppose unless amend, the watch, some sort of slightly softer position. I would think that the author, knowing that this is the district, right, is not interested in his home base opposing his own legislation. So that may give us the opportunity to shift this into a position that we can potentially support or get something we want out of this, right? Something that's helpful and not a dilution of the standard. That's not the point. That's not what we want. But something that becomes a legislative vehicle. Think of these all as like little Easter eggs, right? They're an opportunity to get something really good if it's something you want. I would hope that we could get it in that position and start with someone who will be there for quite some time to be able to have a functional and positive working relationship. Time will tell. If it's legislation as it is, it stays this way and it's introduced year after year, that would be fundamentally different, and we'll know. I just think the nature of the legislative calendar as it is today, plus the nascent term of the author in the legislature, causes me some pause to really ask, tell me more before we take this position. I'm happy to support the thing. I saw some nodding heads with regard to oppose unless amended. I think that's a way to show some courtesy to one of our members of our delegation, but making it very clear that unless something changes, we will be fully in opposition and will direct Paula or whoever else becomes our advocate up there every day to say, to show up at the hearings, which is what this direction will do, to show up at the hearings and say the San Diego County Air Pollution Control District isn't opposed to this bill. That will absolutely capture the attention of every committee member and legislator there, and I suspect would affect the outcome. Knowing that power, I'm willing to spend a little more time trying to mind the relationship and hopefully get an outcome that we want, something that advances our mission.
Great, thank you, Member Gloria. With that, I'm open to amending my motion to, and if the seconder agrees, to oppose unless amended. I'm also open to, so I still want to send a message to oppose. I do hear what you're saying, Member Gloria. I do think this is a unique circumstance with timing. So it sounds like on the ledge calendar that a lot of these hearings are going to happen this month. I know that for a couple of other bills, like I'm going to fly up to Sacramento on the 22nd for a separate bill. So that's, for me, it's timing. And what I wouldn't want to do is wait on not sending a good, clear message. And then we do that because we don't want to offend Assemblymember Alvarez. And it's not about that. It's not personal. It's, we at times, he's a friend. We're going to, conflict on certain, not agree on certain legislation, but I do think we need to be bold. But like you said, a balance of having that courtesy. I don't know if maybe would it be possible, because the next policy meeting is in April, and I think that's too much time for the policy committee. Like, we might miss our mark here. And so is it possible, and I asked the chair of the policy committee, could this be brought back within a week? Could we schedule, something in a week to discuss this, to hash it out? Because I do think there's a want here with all of us as a board to have more information on this too, and what are the true impacts?
Well, as the chair of the policy, yeah, I think we can definitely do that. But I think I'm hearing that and I'm open. I'm not the seconder to this motion, but I think oppose unless amended, something that I'm supportive of. I do think that we do need to communicate with the author and hopefully figure out a way in which we can lead to something that we can support. I do agree with Mayor Gloria on your statements. I 100% supportive of that. We want to make sure that it's in a positive footing, the relationship. But if it's not amended, it's not amended, and it is what it is, and it's clear. So I just do think that dialogue needs to occur. But right now, it's what we have in front of us. And let's make sure that the conversation is more positive. But in relation to the committee, more than happy to gather us. But I think it's more what staff is going to do in between. And that work that happens. So I don't know if we need to meet sooner or later, but if we do, more than happy to do so if need be.
It was just, it was just an idea, Member Sanchez, and then we'll
Right.
call
I do believe that since it's a standing committee now, it would require a notice. So probably 2 weeks versus 1 week. Just yeah.
So, and we will say, it sounds like we might not need it. I can really hear from colleagues if it's needed or not. And it sounds like maybe it's not needed. So I would just, Member Sanchez, do you agree with the oppose unless amended for the second?
Yes.
Okay. So yeah, so I amended that part, oppose unless amendment. And any last comments before we call the question? Okay. We have a motion.
Matter of order, because we do still have the original motion on the floor. So under our bylaws, it would mean that we need a motion made on the amendment, which needs a second. That amendment needs a vote, and then we need to vote back on the whole adoption of the policy.
We haven't voted on that.
No, but it's on the floor. So there's already a motion and a second on the original proposal, which was to adopt a legislative policy with an opposition on AB 1372. So that's still on the floor. So we need, if there's a different vote that's being considered, we need an amendment vote.
Yes. So, okay. So so what you're saying, council, is we just need to, so I was the maker of the motion and then Member Sanchez seconded it. So you're saying that we need to make another motion to amend, and we need.
I don't think so, because we haven't passed the first one. Right?
Well, once it's passed, then you cannot make.
We haven't.
They've already amended. He's already amended the motion
on
the floor. You're saying that a vote needs to be taken on that amendment?
Right, so under section 1.13.5 of our bylaws, which is called amendment of motion, it says a motion on the floor may be amended by motion at any time before adoption or rejection. If the motion to amend fails, the original motion will be voted upon. If the motion to amend passes, the amendment is adopted, and thereafter the original motion as amended will be voted.
Okay,
No,
so
the-
then we'll take a
The
vote.
original motion was amended. There was no motion just to move forward with staff's recommendation.
Well,
Motion.
Okay, I think we'll follow the council's recommendation. So we'll make a motion to amend the original motion.
Okay.
Right? Is that what?
So we can have a board member.
So I can't make that motion then? Okay. Okay, so yes. Well, so it sounds like we have a motion on that from member Martinez and we need another second. Okay.
So yes, move to amend the motion to include, to approve the item, but include, regarding AB 1372, oppose, and oppose unless amended position.
Yeah, we need a second to that. Okay, and second from member Gloria. So we have a motion, a second, and council are you good, is it good with that?
Yes, that would be great if we could do a roll call. Yes, yeah.
Great, thank you for that clarification. Sorry for the confusion.
No, thank you. It is confusing.
All right, Marvis, will you call the roll?
Thank you. Member Gloria?
Aye.
Member Gomez?
Yes.
Member Martinez?
Yes.
Member Medina?
Aye.
Member Sanchez?
Aye.
Member Chair Bush?
Yes.
With members Burkbeck Garcia, Elo Rivera, Lawson Reamer, Shu, and Vargas absent, that motion passes with all board members who are present voting aye.
Great. Thank you everyone for a healthy discussion and debate. So moving on to that concludes most of the informational items. Now we'll move on to the air pollution control officer report. Paula?
What, don't we now have to vote on a main motion?
No.
Oh.
Okay.
Yes, yeah, we do.
Just to, okay, so going back, there was a question for member Sanchez. Member Sanchez, did you want to ask that question of council?
I heard the question and she is right that we do need to do that.
So you need a main motion vote also?
Yes.
Correct.
Because there was.
And maybe next time I'll write this out in
Understood.
format. So we're
Understood. Thank you.
Okay.
So let's go back to that item. Thank you for that clarification. So we're going back to the original motion, which the original motion was made by myself. Now it's amended and it was seconded by Sanchez. So with that, Marvis, can you call the roll on that?
Thank you. Member Gloria?
Aye.
Member Gomez?
Yes.
Member Martinez?
Yes.
Member Medina?
Aye.
Member Sanchez?
Aye.
Chair Bush?
Yes.
Thank you. With members Burkbeck Garcia, Lawson Reamer, Elo Rivera, Shu, and Vargas absent, that motion passes with those board members who are present voting aye.
Thank you. And I believe now we can move on to the air pollution control officer report. Ms. Paula?
Thank you, Chair Bush and board members. I just have a few brief updates. And before I launch in, I really want to acknowledge APCD staff that's here today. This is our first in-person meeting. As you know, we are doing our first hybrid meeting to ensure that members of the public are able to participate remotely. And so it is no small feat. So I want to thank our clerks, Marvis and Mia, our IT staff in the back, Athena and Eric. We have admin staff here, our PIO Melina, and we've got our chief of admin Araceli, and then all of our subject matter experts here with me and behind me. And I just want to say thank you to all of them because we have a really terrific team that's put this meeting together. And then I want to thank Chair Bush. He came out on March 1st to help celebrate our second anniversary of the separation from the county. And it was a great celebration. We had about 50 staff in attendance and we're able to take him on a tour of our offices, and staff really appreciate it. I will say it was a nice celebration in conjunction with Employee Appreciation Week. And so it was much appreciated to have Chair Bush out to meet everyone. And then next, I want to highlight the calendars that you all received, our annual 2023 Kids Calendar Contest. Let us know if you would like more copies of those. And thank you to Melina, our PIO, and to Mia for their work on that. Next, I have a couple of updates from our Toxic Hotspots program. Since the last governing board meeting, we have approved one risk reduction plan for California commercial asphalt in Lakeside, and that's been implemented. And then we have received 3 additional ones that we're currently working through. And then wanted to call to your attention on emission inventory. We have new state requirements that are significantly increasing the number of facilities that we will be doing emissions inventories for. And that's great news for the public. It's a resource challenge for us, but we are making it work with some really terrific staff and an online ability for those facilities to submit their emissions. And so we are going from calculated emissions for about 150 facilities to over 2,000 facilities. And so we've held 2 webinars with facilities to ensure that they are they know what they are required to do and how to use the system. And we had over 200 attendees at each of these trainings. And then we're going to be participating in the next couple of weeks with another training that the Industrial Environmental Association is doing on this program. So, so that's great news. It's really going to increase transparency to have that additional emissions data for all those different facilities. And then finally, I just wanted to highlight that our new office space for inspectors that was approved by this board in National City has been put into operation. We're hearing very great comments about that. We're increasing our presence in the Portside community as a result. And these are hoteling stations for field inspectors at the County Health and Human Services Association building in National City. So we'd like to acknowledge HHSA's collaboration in setting up an MOU with us for that space at a very reasonable price, I might add. So thank you all. That concludes my updates.
Thank you, Ms. Forbes. And I also appreciate the invitation to meet and speak to your staff. And I definitely, now that we're open, now that we're doing more in-person events, definitely want to encourage all my colleagues to go up and visit. It's a little far for some of us in Scripps Ranch, the office, but it really was eye-opening for me. And it really just brought things home, the importance of our organization, looking and seeing all the equipment, getting to meet staff. So I really appreciate staff's hospitality. And, you know, it's hard to remember everyone's names, but I saw the dedication and learned so much about just everyone's unique roles and just everything that we do, that we encompass. And I'm still learning, and I just really encourage staff to work with, also colleagues on those tours. So thank you. Did any of the other members have questions or comments on our executive director's comments? No? Okay. So moving on to Planning and Policy Committee report. And that's Member Gomez. Anything to report?
Nothing. We just heard it.
We did.
The one thing that I would say, though, aside from what was adopted in the work that we did last time, is that the committee is going to be meeting every the months that we're not meeting as a board. We might not need to meet as much, but just so the committee members are aware of that. I think staff is going to follow up to find out when our next meeting will be, but with the hopes that we actually have a set schedule, because these meetings are supposed to be notified. So just please do work with staff when they're asking you about your calendar. And when you do say that you are available, please do come, because we had some issues with quorum, but we were able to get there.
All right. Thank you, Member Gomez. Before we adjourn, any other comments from our board? Member Martinez?
Thank you, Chair. So I wanted to share that in January, it's been a little while since we last met, but in January, the APCD did participate in the California Core Program at Kit Carson Park in Escondido, and I was able to go, and it was a great event. It was well attended. I wasn't sure. Sometimes it's hard to spread the word about these kind of events, but it was to regarding the state's voucher program for commercial lawn and garden equipment. So it was targeted for landscaping businesses, and it was just a great turnout. So I just want to say thank you to all who worked on that. I know there was community-based organizations that also helped with outreach, but I'll say that I did ask a lot of the attendees how they heard about it, because I was very curious, and a lot of them had heard about it through the Spanish radio station. So just wanted to share that, because that worked for that event. And I know it was kind of, outreach was done in just a short amount of time, but it was still a great turnout. So, and the weather cooperated that day. That was great because I think it was February, maybe or late January when that happened. But yeah, so I just highly encourage us to continue using the radio when we want to reach especially the Spanish speaking community. Thank you.
All right, thank you for that. And with that, that concludes our business for today. The next meeting of APCD board will be held in person on May 11th, 2023 at 2 p.m. With that, we're adjourned. Thank you.